Okay, talking about identities. Okay, so again, to clarify the first video, I know it's still not as clear. It's a little tricky. Again, we know, right? If we're looking at this triangle, we know if we're looking at angle here, this is the reference angle here, angle A, that would make this the opposite side. We know the hypotenuse side. We know the adjacent side. See, you're not going to be using this SOHCAHTOA anymore. I'm just setting it up so that you can see the ratios right now. Okay, so let me do this quickly. We know that sine of A would be right? 5/13. We know that cosine of A would be ca A over H would be 12/13. And we know that tangent of A is TOA, O over A, 5/12. Okay, that's obviously pretty easy, and you know that. And then you also know that what? Well, you know the other three, the new three, right? You know that. If this is true, then you know that cosecant of A is 13/5. Okay, that is still good. This is all still true. And this will be secant of A, and that'll be 13/12. And if tangent, the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent, that's 5/12. This is 12/5. Okay. What the identities are pretty much saying, it's just the formulas. It's just the formula that gets this 5/13 to go to 13/5. That's all it is. You can't say that sine is equal to cosecant. You can't say that. If you say that sine is equal to cosecant, then you're saying that sine of A is equal to cosecant A. They are not equal to each other. If they're equal to each other, sine of A is 5/13, and cosecant of A would be equal to it, 5/13. No, they're not equal to each other. Right? So I need some sort of formula, or I need an identity. I need an identity that takes me from 5/13 to 13/5. So I know I can't say that they're equal to each other. So again, what are these identities? It's a formula like this. It's not this one, right? Because they're not equivalent. If I'm saying they're equivalent and sine is 5/13, then this one's 5/13, right? But that's not true. So the question is, if I know that this one is this, if this sine is 5/13, how can I communicate in math what cosecant is? That's where you get this first identity, right? We know it's the reciprocal. I can't say that sine of A is equal to cosine of A. That is not true. So if I know what sine of A is, for me to get cosecant of A, it's not equal to sine of A. It's equal to 1/sine of A. Because remember from the first video, when I make it a fraction, whatever's in the bottom flips over. So this will be what? This will be, I know what sine of A is. Sine of A is 5/13, right? Sine of A is 5/13, right? We know they're not equal to each other. But this, in mathematics, this is how you get a fraction to flip over. You put 1, and then the fraction you put in the bottom, it flips it over. You get 1/, what is sine of A? Sine of A is 5/13. And then when you do 1, right, this is divided by 1 divided by 5/13. That turns into what? 1/1 times what? 13/5. See, that's how we get it to flip over. So this is the identity right here. That tells me that if I know sine of A is 5/13, then to get cosecant of A, you have to do 1 divided by whatever this fraction is. And this is how it flips it over, and you get 13/5. You don't need it. you don't need it because you just know you flip it over, but this is the identity. This is the little equation, the little formula that flips it. So that if I know sine of A, how do I get cosecant? It's 1 over whatever this one is, whatever that number or that fraction is, and this causes it to flip over, and that's how I get the 13 over 5. And it's true for cosine. If I know that cosine of A is 12 over 13, what would be the identity for secant? Well, I'm not going to say they're equal to each other. They're not equal to each other. This one's 12 over 13. This is 13 over 12. How do I get this to flip over? Well, then if I know cosine, that means that secant would have to be what? Not equal to cosine. They're not equal. You have to put 1 over what? Cosine of A. And if you look, cosecant is with sine, just like here, cosecant is with sine. And just like you know here, secant is with cosine. And that's how you get these reciprocal identities. This formula makes this happen. For you and me, we don't need to do all this. I'm just telling you, flip it over. And that's, but mathematically, this is the formula that makes it happen. And for tangent, obviously the same thing. If tangent of A is 5 over 12, how do I get cotangent of A? What formula do I use? I can't say they're equal to each other. They're not. If this was equal to this, if this is 5 over 12, this is 5 over 12. I don't want 5 over 12. I want 12 over 5. So in order for that to happen, it has to be 1 over what? 1 over tangent of A. And that way it'll be what? 1 over, or 1 divided by 5 over 12. And we've been dividing fractions. Remember dividing fractions? 1 over 1, the top, divided by the bottom, 5 over 12. And see what's going to happen now. It'll be 1 over 1 times 12 over 5. See, this, when you put the 1 on top and this in the bottom, it makes whatever your fraction answer here flip over. That's all that these identities are. See, we'll get 12 over 5. Okay? So this is kind of understanding that if you have sine, how do you get cosine? Well, 1 over sine. If I have if you have sine, how do you get cosecant? Well, 1 over sine of A. If you have cosine, how do you get secant? If I have cosine, how do I get secant? 1 over cosine A, right? Because those are the ones that match with each other. And if I have tangent, how do I get cotangent? Well, 1 over, remember if you put 1 over, 1 divided by whatever this fraction is, it's going to flip it over. You'll get 12 over 5. That's all this is explaining. It just explains how you get from one fraction, and it explains how to flip it over. You have to put 1 divided by that fraction for that function. Okay, so that explains these three. And for the same reason, going backwards. Let's say you're given these first. Right? Let's say you're given these first. Cosecant of A is equal to 13 over 5. Secant of A is equal to 13 over 12. Cotangent of A is equal to 12 over 5. Well, we already know we already know we just flip it over to get sine, right? We know this one matches with sine. We know this one matches with cosine. We know that this one matches with tangent. But as far as you getting familiarized with the identities, right? What's the formula? If I know cosecant, let's start with this one. If I know cosecant, what's the formula to give me sine? Or what's the identity to give me sine? I can't say that they're equal to each other because if this is 13 over 5, this is 13 over 5. They are not equal. They're reciprocal. So what do I do to get sine? If I know cosecant, it's 1 over what? Cosecant of A. And that's just it. That's just the understanding. All you have to understand is when you do this and you put this fraction down here, it flips it over and you get 5 over 13. Same thing with this one. If I know secant, how do I get cosine? Well, I know I just flip it over. I know it's 12 over 13. But as far as a math formula or an identity that'll do it, if this is secant, then to get cosine, I would have to do what? 1 and divided by what? Secant of A. Okay? And the same thing here. If I have cotangent, what's the identity to give me tangent? Well, I already know cotangent. How do I get tangent? 1 over what? The fraction of cotangent. And that makes this flip over. We already know. We don't have to do a formula, but you just have to know these. You have to just know these. Okay, so going back to these formulas here. Remember, you have this formula sheet. That explains this one. That explains these 6. That explains these 6 because they're reciprocal identities, right? It's just like knowing this. The same way you understand it, once you get sine, cosine, tangent, the same way you know how to do this. That's all that this is communicated in math. That if I know sine, how do I get cosecant? 1 over that fraction, it'll flip it over. If I know cosine, how do I get secant? Well, 1 over whatever this fraction of cosine, it'll flip it over. And the same thing going this way, going forward, right? This is if I know sine, and if I know cosine, and if I know tangent, how to get these 3. This one, if I know cosecant, how do I get sine? Well, it's the same deal. It's the same thing as this. Okay? All right, on the next video, it'll be shorter. I'll explain the ratio identities. This is new. These you don't know. Okay.